Hi, everyone. Welcome to the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival presented by Visual Communications. My name is Isil Barlasa, and I'm one of the programmers here at the Fest. On behalf of the festival family, thank you for hanging out with us and being here for number 3, the third weekend of C3 Converse presented by Nielsen. If you hung out with us last week, welcome back. If you're new this week, we are in for a great afternoon of film conversations and community. On that note, let us know where you're zooming in from and drop it in the chat. I'm coming to you live from the 562 in Long Beach, California. And in my small part to disrupt colonial structures, I want to acknowledge and thank the Tongva and Kish people for being the original stewards of this land. And while we're getting to know each other in the chat, we'd like to thank everyone for making this festival possible, especially the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Producers Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. And special thank you to all of our community partner organizations for the valuable work that you do and for continuing to support VC. And just like last week, I'm going to do a special shout out for the VC staff. Thank you for hanging with us. And thank you for pulling through for another third week of the festival. For now, let's get into the first panel of the day, The Space Between 2.0. But from our programmer, their notes are, these films are inquiries into the physical and emotional spaces that connect and divide human beings. Selected explorations of social distancing naively curated from a pre-COVID world. Please welcome filmmaker and AWC alum and one of our festival senior programmers, Farook Ferrani.
Hi, everybody. Again, welcome to the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, produced by Visual Communications, and thank you to everybody who's able to be in attendance today. Obviously, in a normal year, it'd be great to screen the films, have a conversation, and continue that conversation at parties or outside the theater after, but hopefully I can facilitate a similar experience here today. Again, like Asil mentioned, my name is Farook. I'm a programmer and filmmaker, and I'm zooming in from my place in Koreatown, and I'm going to acknowledge the Chumash and Tongva people. Another note, if you'd like to read the closed captions, there's a link in the chat, and clicking on that will take you to a new window where you can read the audio transcript. And a couple more items here. Again, we want to thank everyone who is able to make this festival possible, and a special thanks to all of our community partner organizations for their valuable work in continuing to support Visual Communications. So I'm going to go ahead with that in mind. I'm going to start our artist conversation, and I'll invite our filmmakers to turn on their cameras and their audio for some gallery view fun here. We've got a good number of filmmakers from the lineup in attendance. Here they are. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass the virtual mic around and popcorn around for introductions. The film and their name and where they're representing. So I'll go ahead and start with Pia Shah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pia Shah. I am the writer, actor, and one of the producers of the short film, The Shower, here in Los Angeles.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move to Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jesse G. I'm the writer-director of Beam, and I'm here in Torrance, California.
Next, we've got Grace.
I am Grace Kim. I wrote, directed, produced, and edited An Interloper's Kiss. I'm originally from Silicon Valley, but as of right now, I'm based in Brooklyn, New York.
All right, great. I'll go ahead and jump to Dinesh.
Hi, my name is Dinesh Sabu. I made the short documentary Srikna, and I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now.
All right, and then we've got Sudarshan.
Hey everyone, my name is Sudarshan. I wrote and directed Mizaru. I used to be based out of New York, but I've been back in India for about 7-8 months now, and I've been stuck here during lockdown while I prepare for my feature.
All right, and then I've got Beth.
Hey everyone, I'm Beth De Araujo, and I am the writer-director of I Want to Marry a Creative Jewish Girl, and I am tuning in from Outwater in Los Angeles.
Great. And yeah, and I'm glad everybody could be here on a Friday afternoon. So I'll go ahead and kick things off. And again, like Asil mentioned, I don't know, when viewing these films, I felt like there were some loose thematic ties, and I was lucky enough to do a similar program last year where sort of about these, as I interpreted it, I kind of saw these sort of either physical spaces or emotional spaces that kind of either kind of push people apart or bring people together. And so hopefully these films all sort of represent that in some way. And then viewing them again, like from this current year, I don't know, I kind of saw them differently. Maybe in the same way, but differently. But anyway, so I'll sort of frame the questions around that, and maybe some questions might appeal to, or might apply to more filmmakers, and some might be sort of more individualized, but I'll go ahead and jump around if that's okay. But to start, maybe I'll pose a question to the films Beam, Interloper's Kiss, and Shere Khan. I feel like they all sort of use a physical space in an interesting way. You know, Beam obviously a young woman sort of breaking time, space, and traveling around, but doing that for something very personal to her. Interloper's Kiss are defined by a apartment space, and Shere Khan, which is a very specific part of our country and function of our country. So, but I'll let you talk about that. So anyway, I just want to go ahead and ask, maybe sort of start with Beam, but if you could maybe just talk about how space plays in your film and the choices around it, and how that kind of serves the emotional story.
Yeah, for sure. I think I wanted to make a teleportation that kind of action genre, special kind of almost bordering on a superhero kind of story. But the reason why I chose like teleporting, because I think, especially with this story and the character, she's very much constantly running away from her problems. So I was trying to find something where she's constantly using something that, she's fleeing from her problems constantly using teleportation, instead of, where she might see it as she's using it to, help her family or to provide. But in reality, she's just trying to stay away from the realness of the situation she's dealing with.
Great. Yeah, you're it's very effective. And again, like only through that sort of visual language, you totally understand how she's growing or what she's going through. Mm-hmm. And if she finds any healing. So kudos and congratulations on that. And then Grace, so yours is sort of confined to a very limited space. It's like one apartment, and sort of captured over these sort of longer takes and sort of slices of this person's daily life. Can you talk about, just where those choices came from, and maybe how the film kind of evolved visually?
I think at the outset of the film, I was just kind of interested in exploring what intimacy looked like, and not necessarily the intimacy between two people that we kind of think of when we think of that word, but a very specific and like uncommon type of intimacy with oneself that unfolds when you think you're alone. It was obviously inspired by the fact that I would catch myself doing very strange things when I was by myself or thought I was by myself. And so it almost positioned myself as like another stranger that I was getting to know in the space. And so, I think the film was just an exploration of what that specific type of intimacy looked like in a space that had to be isolated in order for it to come about.
Yeah, and it kind of shot and conceived before COVID. I watched it again. I looked at it totally differently. I was like, this is what my everyday life is like now, but except I don't have like, a housefly lover. So, but anyway, that's great. No, and it kind of magnifies those sort of kind of mundane, little particular moments and how beautiful they might look to like an outsider just kind of observing you. So I really love that. Grace Kim says you might have a housefly lover and not know it. I'm going to check. I'm actually getting a lot more fruit flies with all this trash piling up. Anyway, okay, so moving to Dinesh with Shere Khan. For people who haven't seen the film, maybe could you quickly kind of describe what kind of physical space your film documents, and then also maybe talk about how you approach documenting or capturing this space visually in your style. And then this is like the one documentary in the bunch, so it was you literally kind of finding the right lens. So
yeah, absolutely. So the doc is about this truck stop in kind of on the border of Oklahoma and Texas, kind of in between, pretty remote, but halfway between Amarillo and Oklahoma City. And the entire film takes place in that space, right? And actually, I kind of used the space to structure of the film. So it's kind of, it unfolds, this exploration of the space unfolds throughout as the film progresses. So we're in the garage, then we're in the restaurant, then we're in the the front of the stop. But also I think just the space of Oklahoma and thinking about landscape and how this landscape might feel hostile for Indian American truck drivers kind of traveling through. And there's this American flag, this giant American flag that's just kind of waving almost in the background of almost every exterior shot, just kind of like looming over the folks that come through. So
Yeah, no, I thought that was really effective. And yeah, these like Indian American truck drivers just seem so kind of small, or they sort of like disappear sometimes into this landscape. And I love those huge shots, but yeah, but their presence, they find ways to kind of build community in those, getting engulfed by that space, which is awesome, and I really appreciate it. All right, so I'm gonna go over to also two films that equally I thought were like kind of defined by a space or like a place, but obviously I Want to Marry a Creative Jewish Girl. It's about this woman sort of making her way through like life and relationships in an apartment, and then sort of this neighbor who I almost felt like she had like a growing relationship with, that she sort of mirrors herself or reflects herself in. Like they almost have like an emotional responsibility, I felt, to each other. But anyway, the performances I thought performance was really kind of authentic and lived in within the space. Like I felt their sort of emotional relationship to the space. And same for Pia, like it's kind of set in that home, but the home sort of is filled with guests for this baby shower for this woman that has a baby on the way really soon. And then the space sort of empties, and then it's about her relationship with one person. But again, I the sort of authenticity of like the emotions within that moment really came across. So I guess for both of you, can you talk about how, I guess, Pia in your own performance, and then Beth in your actress' performances, how they sort of conjured or created emotional truth within the spaces of the film? I guess I'll start with Beth.
Okay. Well, we had to build the sets because it's very hard to get two apartment building locations and secure both of them and pay for both, essentially two locations in a day. We didn't have that kind of budget. So we built them on a sound stage, and with my lead actors, Michelle and Boone, they just throughout the shoot stayed within the confines of their own apartments, and never switched or never went to that side of the sound stage. Boone especially was very interesting. He would have the second AD walk him with his eyes closed to his apartment from his holding, I guess, spot, and to make sure he really felt lived in the space, which I thought I had never seen an actor work like that, and I thought it was so cool, because the idea is that character never leaves the apartment. He's a recluse, so he really wanted to sort of embody that and feel it out like that. So and then also they're just super talented actors, so I think just casted where I felt my heart was. So
That's great. Yeah, no, that Boone, I recognize from obviously he has a huge filmography, but he was amazing, and Michelle obviously too was, excellent. Okay, Pia, same question.
The space, yeah. So for our film, it was actually shot in my actual apartment, and for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, it is about two best friends who are at a crossroads in their friendship, and I am having a baby shower, and I was actually 8 months pregnant when we were shooting. So there was very little separation from reality and the film we were making. So I was able to draw on my actual apartment and all the things that were in the space. It was all real, and I actually was lucky enough to work with a lot of people that I have a shared history with. So, the lead actors in the film are friends of mine that we have worked together, but also are friends in real life. So you know, the actor Rupak playing my husband and Emily Chang playing my best friend. We were able to draw on those dynamics. It's almost like a dream or real life in a way, you know, where it's like it's this one and the same. And my husband was a PA on the shoot, so it's like he's still around in the periphery, and I can kind of draw on all of those different things that were happening. And like you said, that's a great observation. When everybody leaves, it's just kind of you and the space and your friend, and all those other distractions are gone. And you have to kind of face. I guess she's kind of in quarantine at the end. Could have never imagined in 6 months or 5 months that would be happening after the baby came. But well, at least then I could hear myself think. Now I can't hear myself think because there's an actual baby in my space. But so yeah, I think that, you know, it was great, and that's one of the things you can do when you shoot on location, is you can just really draw on everything, and versus theater or a sound stage where you're aware that there's an element of you know, suspension of disbelief almost. So yeah.
And can you I learned later, but can you talk about you know, when the friends come over for the baby shower, they kind of present her with a little song as part of the celebration. Can you talk about, I mean, that came across as a really like real moment. Can you talk about the process of shooting that?
Yeah, it was real. Mahesh, our director, had 2 friends who are married and are singer-songwriters, and they actually created a song for this pretend baby shower that I had never heard before. So when we were shooting, and we didn't have a lot of takes, you know, we shot the whole thing in one day. We actually used the first take of them playing it for the first time, and my reaction to it, which I think Mahesh thought, I mean, many people probably thought it was, you know, that I was emotional because of the film. And I was, but it's also, depending on how you look at it, you know, it's the friend is leaving the room during the song, and it's just this world that's ending, and this train that's just, it's left the station and there's no going back. So there's so many different ways that, you know, it hit me in that moment. But yeah, it was definitely authentic.
But that wasn't your real baby shower. I mean, you had an actual baby shower.
You know, and this is how you know you're a filmmaker or an actor or creative or whatever, because the whole time I was like, let's just shoot the baby shower, like my actual baby shower. And Mahesh was like, enjoy your real baby shower and we will recreate it. But we did save a lot of the decorations. And I think that the big gift that Emily lugs up the stairs, we never emptied that box like you would in a film where she was just carrying an empty box. It was like still in the box. It was a stroller, and she was like, you didn't empty this, and she had to do it like 5 or 6 times coming up the stairs carrying this like 80-pound stroller. Not that she couldn't have done it without it, but it added to her performance, I think.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, no, I totally enjoyed all those details and care to that sort of attention to the reality of it. All right, and then I will do next. We have not spoken to Mizaru yet, but Sudarshan, there's also, I guess, still on the theme of space. There's a very particular use of space. It's all, again, for those who haven't seen it, all unfolds in this, I believe, park in Mumbai. And it's about this couple sort of, I don't know, it's sort of a public display of affection, and how some sort of local gentlemen decide they need to police that public display of affection. But anyway, so it unfolds in one long take over the course in this one setting in the park. Can you talk about your choice to shoot it as in that style, and why you chose that space, and maybe also what the kind of rehearsal and preparation process was for that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thank you, Farook and Seal and everyone for bringing us together and doing this Q&A. It's very nice to listen to the other filmmakers as well. So it's not like the film was conceived as a one take. Initially, I knew what I sort of wanted to deal with in terms of a topic, in terms of a subject, because it's sort of a growing sort of menace in India of vigilantism, and where the government sort of turns a blind eye to, you know, these self-proclaimed moral police and people who sort of will dictate what the mores of society should be, etc. And there's just a clash between sort of the younger generations, the values of the younger generations versus the values of the older generation, and the conservatism that comes with how India as a society functions, etc. So I want to deal with all of that, but what I was more interested in is sort of capturing the apathy of the society that permits this stuff to happen. So I was sort of interested tonally in capturing just the mundaneness of this kind of violence and this kind of aggression and this kind of policing. So in order to get that tone, I sort of wanted the film to have sort of a languid pace to it, and I wanted to have almost a sort of an ironic kind of like almost like a satirical tone to it. I'm presenting violence on the screen, but it's presented in a way that feels normal and feels almost mundane or sort of daily. And to do that, I sort of felt that and because it's one location, and I wanted the entire film to be in that one location, I wanted the tension to sort of build slowly. And in sort of conceiving of the visuals of the film, I sort of realized that doing it in a long take would be most effective in keeping an audience hooked and being able to build on that tension and build on that sense of unease. But at the same time, I didn't want it to be like a frenzied handheld long take because I wanted the visuals to be at odds with what you're seeing on the screen. So I wanted, while we're seeing violence and while we're seeing disturbing stuff and while we're seeing these kids being accosted by these vigilantes, I wanted the visuals to be sort of calm and nonplussed because I wanted the audience to feel like they're a spectator that's just walking around the park watching what's happening. But sort of with the distance. And so the lens, the perspective is quite objective. It's not very subjective. So you can see that most of the film is in wides and medium wides. You barely get close to the actors except for a few moments here and there. So that's kind of where the decision to do it as a long take came about, and the reason why I chose to do it on a steady cam as opposed to being on any other mode of movement is because I wanted it to feel calm and placid, and I wanted that to add to the sense of unease and sort of discomfort that the audience feels. And at the same time, there's humor in the film as well. So it's almost like the film is telling you, don't take this too seriously because people don't take this too seriously. And that's kind of the reality of this stuff. And I wanted the camera to be a distracted camera, kind of like an audience, kind of like the people walking around the park who will stop and stare at the stuff because it's interesting for 2 minutes, but then will look elsewhere because something else catches their eye. So which is why the camera sort of leaves the action to follow this old man while he does his laughter yoga, follows a peanut seller. And so so that was kind of the thinking behind the whole process. It came up organically. It's not like I started with this desire to make a long take, whatever. But I also realized this is my thesis at film school, and I was like, if there's any time to take a risk, this is probably the best time to try it. But we almost didn't have a film because we had a one-day shoot, and we had 13 takes. And this was our second last take because I always wanted the final take to be in magic hour. The light was perfect then. But because the light keeps changing through the day and because the angle of the shadows changes, so we have to keep reorienting and re-choreographing. We had 1 day of rehearsals on location before the film. And we had about 2 weeks of table reads where I worked with the actors to ensure that they knew exactly who they were as people, as characters, what their intentions were, what their beats were, because on the day off, I knew I couldn't cut for performance because we didn't have that luxury. So people need to know themselves in and out. And we made sure everyone knew their marks the day before the shoot. So on the day off, it was more about making sure everyone delivered on what they had prepared for.
Yeah, there was a lot of kind of emotional moving parts and sort of clusters of drama and then people coming and going. And yeah, I thought all that just played so organically and perfectly. And yeah, no, I totally respond to what you were saying. You do feel like, I was like just right there and I felt so uncomfortable for the characters. Like there's no escape. Like I just keep watching them being put through this sort of public abuse or public shaming almost. Yeah, it's almost like a scarlet letter assigned by these weird vigilante Indian uncles. So really effective. Yeah, and I guess, again, viewing it from now, anyway, that public space is very different, I'm sure now. But anyway, I was going to still kind of on that, responding to what you were kind of talking. Oh, Grace, I was going to ask you the same. Maybe you already touched on it, but again, the choice to sort of do it in these sort of longer vignettes. What were your some of your choices, or how did that kind of affect your? Oh, what was kind of? I guess what were some of your influences going in, and then how did that affect your normal filmmaking process, shooting it in this different style?
Yeah, I think I had mentioned in prior to this call that we also shot the whole film in one day. That seems to be a running theme here. Yay, budget filmmaking. Yeah, we shot the film in one day, and what's interesting about the shot list was that we had one shot per scene, and obviously that reveals itself in the edit, but pretty much, the shots you see in the film are like the only shots that we got. There's no other coverage or anything to cut away to the point that when I was in the edit, I kind of stared at my Premiere timeline. I was like, do I even have a film, or are these just like singular shots that don't mean anything? And I had written voiceover in the original script, but the voiceover actually was a lot more sparse before we got into post-production. And then I actually wrote the voiceover again, and it had a lot more details in it, and there was a lot more length to it in post. Also, shout out to my actress who's in the chat with us today, Yi. Thanks for joining. So in terms of kind of like early influences, I cite Chantal Akerman as one of the influences for this film. I think I was just, at the time, this was my second film that I'd made, and I'd written it just a few months after wrapping up my first debut short, which was a dark comedy, and it was very narrative. So how I came into filmmaking was actually that I thought I wanted to be a screenwriter, and so I was just writing screenplays for a long time before I got to direct my first film, and then I realized I liked directing a lot more than I liked writing. And my first film was very, had that traditional, story arc, like a climax and a story that resolved itself really cleanly. And so if that first film was an exploration of a narrative structure, then the second film was an exploration of tone. And I was really interested in how I could evoke tone through truly just the elements of cinema and less on story and a script. So yeah, I think I just wanted to capture just the quiet feeling of being alone and being alone with your thoughts and having to sit in that with nothing else. So yeah.
Again, I'm still looking for my fruit fly lover over here. That's gonna be it. But yeah, no, I appreciated the style, and yeah, there's simple poetry in the daily, like I mentioned earlier, that it totally captured. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe transition to the time we have left, and hopefully squeeze in another round of questions. But sort of the origins of stories and how things came to be. But we'll start with Dinesh. Maybe we talked a little bit earlier, but if you kind of talk about how you discovered this sort of truck stop and these groups of Indian truckers, and how you found them, maybe how you decided to take it on, and then I thought we had talked in a previous conversation about how you maybe approached them, in terms of cinematic influence, how you viewed them as characters. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was based in Chicago for a really long time, and I was on my way out to California for grad school. So I was actually just traveling across the country, and I'm on I-40, and I see this it's kind of middle of nowhere, and there's this billboard that says something like Indian food exit now. This is bright yellow billboard, middle of nowhere, and I'm like, I gotta do it. This is middle of nowhere. And that's kind of how I just stumbled on this this little bubba that had this truck mechanic shop in the back, which is the whole stop. And then that's kind of how I discovered the whole subculture of Indian American, mostly Punjabi long haul truck drivers, right? They're mostly based in California, not exclusively, but mostly Central Valley, California, and they're on their way kind of delivering produce out east. So I kind of put that in the back of my head, and then a few years later, I was working on a thesis project. I needed to come up with a thesis project for my grad school MFA program, and the idea kind of came back. And then in terms of the latter half, the second part of the question, like I don't know, I used to be obsessed with Westerns. Like I've watched a lot of Westerns, and something about the landscape and the material really lent itself to like just these really wide, flat, kind of windy landscapes, these really, really big, wide compositions. But then also like truck driving is such a kind of masculine, like stereotypically masculine kind of activity, just like, you know, being a cowboy, I guess. So it's these like, I kind of thought about it in terms of like the iconography of the Western, right? Really you know, wide compositions, but then also like John Ford and like how in The Searchers, you've got these like frames within frames and silhouettes and a lot of stuff happening in foreground and background, and just kind of playing around with it in that way.
Yeah, no, that totally captured that dynamic in an interesting way. And yeah, I'm from Texas originally, but on my next trip out, I'm gonna go find these truck stops and try the food. It seems like the food looks really good.
Yeah, there's one in every state, and actually this community has gotten a little bit more press of late. So it's their reputation is kind of growing. But yeah, there's at least one of these truck stops in every state, I'm told.
Yeah, and yeah, you capture their sort of emotional state so visually fantastically. But I'm just curious, like a quick question, like did they kind of, there's not a ton, you don't really get to hear from the characters, but did they talk about their sort of like loneliness to you, like off camera, or like is there anything that you took away from your conversations with these drivers? Or?
No, yeah, they really opened up, and yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly lonely kind of occupation. Most of these folks are in their early or mid 20s. They're really young. They all talk about how they're planning on getting married and settling down, and you know, truck driving is very much a short-term kind of occupation for them. But just as a doc filmmaker, I was kind of struck at how willing they were to just open up on camera. No, I was prepared to face a lot of like questions, and not hostility, but just like, what are you doing with that camera? Like, but I think when people saw me there shooting, they were really curious, and they really wanted to kind of share parts of their stories with me.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. You entered their world and brought that to them. That voice box anyway. All right, I'm gonna popcorn over to Beth. I am aware, I think I know that you have a Gawker piece of the same title, I believe, and there was a moth piece you had performed. Can you? Oh, I'm just curious. Like, how did the Gawker piece kind of influence this, and how much of yourself is in the film? If you can talk a little bit about some specifics in the film, that if there's parts of your life that make its way in.
Okay. Yeah, so it was originally a short story that I wrote pretty much. Actually, I think all of my work tends to be semi-autobiographical in the origin, and then I sort of take the liberty of fiction to sort of carve a narrative that I like. And with the short story, it was really more about sort of you can kind of play yourself, but you can create a character within yourself that is a bit bolder, is a bit witty, kind of like the internal dialogue can get carried away. But this was a situation very much based on my life. Like, I didn't undress in front of my neighbor, but everything else is pretty much true in that. Even though this is like a fictional film, it's not a documentary. So, we filmed this, but it's pretty much a lot of the situations happened. I shared an apartment window with this other guy who had the exact same apartment as me. And it was, 7 feet away, and we could see into each other's lives. And I went on a walk with a girlfriend one day, and I was saying, gosh, like all these guys that I'm dating, I feel like I we had jokingly named the guy across the way Fred. We didn't actually, I never met him, but I felt like I knew him, so I decided to name him. And then I said, gosh, I feel like Fred knows me better than any of these guys that I'm actually dating. And she was like, you should write that. And so I took that to heart and I just started chipping away at it. And then to apply to the AFI directing workshop for women, you need to apply with a script. And I wanted to apply to the program. So I just adapted the short story into something that I felt like I could shoot. And it became, I think, more and more fictionalized the more you work on something, because it, obviously you start sort of seeing clarity in terms of what you want an audience to experience versus what you actually experienced. Yeah, I think that was about it.
Okay, and so then just curious, so that title line, I want to marry a creative Jewish girl, that was something that actually occurred or somebody actually said?
Yes. Yeah. I think, I can't speak for every Asian woman, but I think like yellow fever is very real, and I grapple with it myself. And I think that I was definitely in a phase of my life where, it's like an easy catch. You can like spot the guys that have yellow fever. It's very easy. And I think for someone who's insecure and someone who's going through a hard patch in their life where they want attention and they want some false sense of affirmation, it's a very easy way to get it very quickly. But of course that's not, real intimacy. So.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So again, Fred had none of that, which was great. I think.
I know. I always wonder. I'm like, I wonder if he read it and if he ever, would recognize himself in it.
Yeah, he was a good one. Okay, and then you actually did move away from that space that you shared the windows in like in the film, or?
Yeah, I wrote it actually right after I moved out of the studio apartment. I kind of had this like bit of clarity on those few years of my life, and I just did it once I moved out of Silver Lake.
Got it. Okay, and then Jesse, same sort of question about in terms of origin and what went into creating the script and the story. Obviously it's about a young woman who sort of seems like she's grappling with sort of financial responsibility to loved ones and family, and sort of drifting away from that. And that sort of motivates her fantastic actions in this really well done science fiction piece. But can you talk about what went into it, or what kind of influences personally, or what you saw in the world in creating the story?
Yeah, I mainly, because I love action movies, that's kind of what I want to make, but doing that on a budget is borderline impossible. So I was just trying to brainstorming what I could pull off, and I think I'm influenced a lot by stories that where the characters are pushed to the brink. They have to go beyond themselves. So I think I was trying to make a story where this person, though she has some fantastical device that can help her with all these things, she still needs to push herself emotionally and personally. I love stories where someone has to risk everything, basically put their life on the line for, whatever cause they're fighting for. So yeah, I just want to make something action-packed, but kind of hit home to that theme and just kind of that family dynamic where, I feel like, regardless of circumstances, sometimes, family's kind of the number one thing, especially in Asian kind of culture. Family always comes first. It's very that nuclear family that's very important in comparison to like individualistic Western culture. So that's kind of the main keystone that I want to put, but wrap it in a fun, colorful action-packed story.
Yeah, no, yeah, you know, sometimes there's sort of, you know, set pieces or sort of action that sometimes feels divorced for a story. But I feel like in your case, like it would totally feel integrated into her experience. And sometimes you do feel like you kind of go through these leaps and bounds for family, and you're like, I don't know if I can do all this during this time in my life, or this is really going to challenge me to put this sort of emotional energy into my family. But I thought it really fit well in that visual style. And your lead actress was great. I thought she really embodied that. And Dia Frampton, who, as some people might know, is known for her, I think, high level of success on the show, The Voice.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about approaching her as an actress, or how she was a choice?
Yeah, she was great. Yeah, I didn't know her previously. I didn't know about her music career, but a friend of mine had worked with her previously, and we were looking for an Asian American actress, and no one kind of fit the traits we needed, where someone could kind of take the physicality of it and the emotional aspects. And when we messaged her and she came out and auditioned, I was sold. I was like something about her, she has it. And I didn't know, but she had never done any sort of action or physical kind of roles like this before. So she kind of kept that hidden from me, and she kind of just played it off. And then when it was showtime, she really pulled through, and just, there was a lot of running. We had to throw her down a lot, and I'm very grateful she took all those hits. And, you know, we had a stunt team that kind of guided her through all the stunts, but yeah, she really, you know, went after it, and yeah, she really delivered. I think because especially every scene almost has her in it. It entirely hinges on her. So yeah, we're really grateful that she pulled through, and she did great.
Yeah, and yeah, her physicality was so much of the arc too, and yeah, she totally captured that so well. Yeah, so kind of viewing this, I just wonder, any quick responses or quick reactions, like viewing your films now from where we are in the pandemic and quarantine, like, I don't know, are you viewing them differently at all, or is there any takeaways you looking back on your film that you observe now? Could be anything, and maybe I'm reaching, but if there's anything you pick up on, I'll start with Dinesh.
Yeah, maybe not to the quarantine pandemic part, but I think that if I could acknowledge just like politically what's happening right now, particularly having relocated back to the Midwest, and what it means to be brown in the Midwest as opposed to I had 3 glorious years of being brown in California. It was lovely. But I think looking at this community in Oklahoma, it's just seeing what's happening politically in Wisconsin. I don't know. I don't feel good about it. I'll put it that way.
I also do not feel good about it. Okay. But anyway, I assume everybody here is going to be sending their ballots out and voting soon. So anyway, I will jump to Pia now for any reactions from the present, looking at your past work.
Yeah, I guess, well, you know, I'm attending Emily's baby shower on Sunday, but it will be a Zoom baby shower. So that's how baby showers are happening nowadays. And I've attended a couple, and it kind of just makes you realize, you know, the things that you thought were the problems then are going to be completely compounded, and the pandemic will really show you, you know, I mean, it's tragic, but it's really separating the winners and the losers. There's class, there's so many different things, and everyone is having a completely different experience of the pandemic based on, you know, whether you're still employed, whether you live in an area where people are wearing masks. And, you know, my child can't even wear a mask now. So it's a whole other movie that I'll be writing. But just to backtrack a little bit in terms of, you know, the way that our film came to be, it had been percolating for so long in my mind about, you know, whether or not to have a child. So it was that very personal decision that I think everybody can relate to. And, you know, one of the filmmakers was talking about making the action movie. And I was thinking, you know, like, action movies are so epic. And sometimes you have these small moments that are so epic because they're going to change your whole life. And that's how I felt. Like, anytime I had a friend tell me who was very close to me that she was having a baby, like in my 20s, I would freak out on the inside. But you can't, it's taboo to say anything except like, congratulations. But you can't be like, am I gonna lose you? You know, which is really, when you're not in the same transitional space of going into adulthood as we've traditionally known it, it's a loss, and can be experienced as a betrayal, because there's sometimes this unsaid, you know, pact that you have with people where you're like, oh, we're all doing the same thing right now, and we're all, but then someone breaches that and goes their own way, and you're like, oh, whoa, where does that leave me? And so, you know, I think in past generations, it wasn't really a question whether or not you would have children. People just did it. But in our generation, it's very much an option to not have children. And so it's this life choice that's irrevocable. And I wanted to explore what that means, you know, on film, because I hadn't really seen a story that told this particular moment before, where it's not that easy reaction of just like, hey, great, congratulations. It's like, it's opening a whole other can of worms, and revealing to yourself your own insecurities. I mean, I went around like a lunatic asking every woman I met for about 8 years whether or not they were going to have children, like within 5 minutes of meeting them, because I was so curious how people came to that decision. Oh, Sudarshan came back. It's also like the middle of the night in India, by the way, for him. I'm like, what time is it in India? But you can still hear like all the honking and the streets of Mumbai. But so just to, you know, go back, it was one of those things where it's not a given anymore. You can go many, many different ways. And it's actually a huge subterranean impact that's going to happen on your life that people don't really pay as much attention to. So I wanted to give voice to that. It's funny because I signed with a new manager when I was 7 or 8 months pregnant, and he was like, do you have a writing sample? And I was like, he'd seen Grass with me and Emily, and he knew that I had written before, and I didn't, but because it had been percolating in my mind for so long, I was able to just jam it out in a day or two and send it over. And he was like, we should shoot this. Adil Chamaki's on our call right now. And, you know, we made it one location from what it was, and from what it was in the script. And we shot it, and I'm so glad that we got it out. And sometimes you just need that like extra push, like someone was saying, where their friend was like, you should write this. And that's what happened. So that's how our film came to be. And thank you so much for having all of us. It's great. I'm a huge fan of so many people on this call too. So like Sudarshan, so.
Great. Yeah. No. I have responses to that, but I'll save it. Yeah, we're like squeezing in the last couple minutes here. So if anybody else has wanted a quick response to how they viewed their film, and that, Sudarshan, the question was, how do you view your work differently now from the pandemic year, looking back? But I'll go to Jesse real quick.
Yeah. I guess I really want a teleportation device. Be a much safer way to travel. Yeah, I think just looking back, you know, the story was mainly kind of like hinging on this kind of survival kind of theme, like doing whatever you can to provide. I think now it's kind of like whatever you can do to provide in this kind of current climate. And in a weird way, I feel like my film kind of pales in comparison now. Before it was like, hey, trying to dramatize, you know, what's the most intense moment for this character. And I was like, wow, you didn't even have a pandemic in your story. So I feel like our story is a little bit more intense and dramatic, but yeah, I would want a teleportation device.
That's fair. I feel the same. Then maybe I'll go Beth and Grace.
I don't really view my story any differently, I think, from the pandemic. I just really miss shooting. I miss like the community of filmmakers and filmmaking. And I think the characters in my story would never take for granted the outside world ever again. I hope after this.
Yeah. And Grace, same question.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess my film, you know, it follows a person in isolation in one place by themselves. So like a part of me thinks that maybe my film is actually it's just a moot point now because everyone has experienced basically what we're seeing unfold on screen. So I don't know, in that way, I guess isolation just means something different for people now. Like we have a new cultural definition of isolation and everyone, like Pia said, it's a very different experience for everyone going through it, depending on who you are, where you are, and your, all that. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the short answer is I don't know if my film is adding to the layer of like, oh, have you considered this aspect of isolation, or if it's just irrelevant now because everyone now has a new definition of it.
Yeah, you're right. Everybody has like their own isolation stories now, and it was like, oh, yeah, it's like I see myself in there. But yeah, there might be next year's, future festivals, it might be like a year of like everybody's got their isolation stories. Oh, anyway, so you were ahead of the genre. Okay. Okay, and Sudarshan, to wrap up, I guess your response if you're viewing your film any differently from the present.
Yeah, I'm probably just being cynical because I was cynic, But I feel like, my film in general is about apathy, and it's about people sort of turning a blind eye to impropriety because it doesn't concern them. They don't want to sort of interfere in other people's business, etc. And I just feel like post the pandemic and post this era of our lives where we've all sort of gotten even more cocooned within our own lives, within our own existence, I kind of feel like there seems to be more of that sort of tide of apathy that's sort of washing over all of us. Because I feel like people have already sort of checked out from the political process in India. Like in the first few months of when the pandemic started, people were sort of up in arms about the government's response and this and that. But I feel like now, sort of 6 months in, people have just are blah. They're like, whatever's happening is happening. And so I feel like people have become sort of inert to other people's suffering or other people's dilemmas, and sort of gotten more and more insulated. And so maybe that's sort of a cynical thought to have, but I kind of feel like if I had to make that film today, it might reflect how we've perhaps grown a little further apart. Of course, the world's also gotten more connected in many different ways, but I mean within India, in terms of us sort of being inert to each other's issues and problems, and I kind of feel like maybe it's getting a little worse.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
End on that note.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, you're right. With the sort of collective global trauma, just to wrap up, I know you start to form like scabs or get hardened to it a little bit when there's just so much of unfortunate circumstances. And you're right. Yeah, no. So, but anyway, I believe personally, I felt that these films all kind of generate empathy and put you in the shoes of somebody from a different space or walk of life. So I really appreciate all the work, and I want to thank all of our filmmakers for joining. We're reaching the end here. Sorry for running a little long, but again, thank you everybody for being part of this amazing conversation and your honest, thoughtful answers. Really appreciated it. So again, just give a quick thank you again to all our filmmakers. And for those who haven't had a chance to check them out yet, you can check, they are available to view through the month of October, this whole shorts program. There's a link in the chat box now. And if you like the films, please tell a friend, please share online. And if you enjoyed this conversation, check the festival lineup for upcoming conversations, and please consider donating to Visual Communications. Your support will help sustain our year-round operations and programming. You can go to vcmedia.org for info. And please stick around next, the conversation coming immediately after with Balajit Sangra, director of the fantastic documentary Because We Are Girls. And last bit, for the most recent updates on the festival, please visit festival.vcmedia.org or follow us on our social media accounts at VC Film Festival. And don't forget to include the hashtag LAAPFF 2020. So thank you everybody again, and thanks for taking this time. And I really appreciate being able to have this conversation with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So much for